Aarav Malhotra and Lily Morgan were supposed to be the perfect couple, celebrating the start of their new life together on a dream honeymoon in Australia. Friends and family saw nothing but joy, laughter, and excitement in their photographs. But behind closed doors, a storm was quietly brewing. Aarav's growing jealousy and insecurity twisted every innocent interaction into a threat, and Lily, unaware of the darkness building around her, continued to embrace the adventure with hope and trust. What began as a celebration of love quickly spiraled into a chilling tragedy, leaving both families shattered and two nations in shock as the horrifying truth came to light. Aarav Malhotra grew up imagining a future filled with travel, success, and companionship. When he met Lily Morgan, he believed those dreams were finally becoming real. Lily carried a gentle confidence that drew people toward her effortlessly. She enjoyed learning about other cultures and had always been fascinated by India, which made their relationship feel meaningful to both families. Their wedding was a vibrant blend of traditions and joy, with smiling photographs that made everything look perfect. Friends described them as a couple who balanced each other, with Aarav's quiet nature and Lily's warm energy making them appear inseparable. To everyone watching, their story seemed like a promising start to a long and happy life. After weeks of planning, they chose Australia for their honeymoon. Lily had visited once during college and wanted to show Aarav the breathtaking beaches, coastal towns, and wildlife she had admired. Aarav agreed, hoping the trip would deepen their bond and give them peaceful time together. As they prepared to travel, excitement grew on both sides of the family. Social media posts captured their smiles, boarding passes, and matching luggage tags. The couple appeared as though they were stepping into a new adventure with complete certainty. But beneath Aarav's outward calm, unnoticed tensions had begun to form. The pressure of marriage, the weight of expectations, and his own insecurities lingered in the background. He often feared not being enough for Lily, though he never expressed this openly. Instead, he distracted himself by focusing on honeymoon plans and imagining the trip as a reset button for his emotions. He believed that once they reached Australia, everything would fall perfectly into place. Yet the seeds of his unease were already planted. As their flight ascended and the world below disappeared into clouds, Aarav carried with him an internal storm he hoped would fade, but instead, it quietly grew stronger. The couple arrived in Queensland expecting sunshine, calm evenings, and a sense of freedom after months of wedding preparations. At first, everything seemed picture-perfect. Their resort sat near a quiet stretch of coastline where the waves rolled gently against the sand. Lily woke each morning eager to explore, taking in the scenery with fresh excitement. She photographed beaches, collected seashells, and wandered through local markets with genuine curiosity. To her, the honeymoon felt like the start of a new, shared life filled with discovery. Aarav, however, experienced the trip differently. Although he tried to mirror Lily's enthusiasm, small moments began to unsettle him. He noticed how easily people gravitated toward her. Hotel staff who complimented her kindness, strangers who admired her travel energy, and guides who appreciated her willingness to learn. These harmless interactions stirred something uncomfortable inside him. Each smile directed at her made his chest tighten, and each friendly gesture from others fed into a quiet insecurity he struggled to control. What began as fleeting discomfort soon developed into a pattern. Aarav found himself analyzing situations, wondering if Lily enjoyed the attention she received. He felt overshadowed by her confidence and charm, even though she treated him with care and expected nothing but support in return. Instead of communicating his feelings, he withdrew into silence, observing her every move more than participating in the experiences they had planned. The tension became noticeable in subtle ways. Aarav stepped back during group activities, lingered behind during walks, and avoided situations where Lily interacted with others. Lily sensed a shift, but believed he was simply tired from the long travel days. She continued, trying to create joyful memories, unaware of the emotional distance growing between them. With each passing day, The warmth of Queensland's coastline contrasted deeply with the cold unease. As the days passed, Aarav's thoughts became increasingly clouded by suspicion. What had started as vague discomfort developed into a constant, intrusive pattern he couldn't escape. Every small moment seemed to feed his imagination. If Lily paused to take a photo, he wondered who she planned to send it to. If she smiled at someone passing by, he questioned whether she had smiled the same way at him earlier. His mind created stories out of nothing, and once they took shape, he treated them as truth. The peaceful surroundings no longer felt relaxing. Instead, they sharpened his anxiety, making each interaction feel threatening. Lily continued exploring happily, not noticing how deeply Aarav was sinking into his own thoughts. She booked day trips, planned scenic drives, and tried to introduce him to local cuisine. But each effort she made only increased the pressure inside him. He convinced himself that she was trying too hard to distract him, as if she had something to hide. Small misunderstandings grew into heavy assumptions, and his jealousy spread through everything he observed. Aarav began monitoring Lily's actions more closely, checking her phone glances, studying her reactions, and comparing her behavior to memories he twisted in his mind. He replayed harmless events from the wedding, conversations, compliments, and cheerful interactions, seeing them now as signs he had missed. His world narrowed until he could only focus on what he feared, not what was real. The more he tried to reassure himself, the more suspicious he became. By the middle of the honeymoon, Aarav felt trapped inside an emotional storm he could no longer hide. His sleepless nights added weight to his already distorted thoughts. The quiet of their rental home seemed louder than city noise, and each moment alone with his imagination became unbearable. His jealousy, once a passing insecurity, now controlled every decision he made, quietly pushing him toward a point he no longer recognized as Dan. The evening that changed everything began quietly, wrapped in the calm that usually settled over their rental home near the coastal lookout. The sky dimmed early, covered by slow-moving clouds that muted the sunset. Lily spent most of the afternoon organizing photos from their trip, unaware of the storm brewing behind Aarav's distant expressions. He paced through the house in restless loops, unable to silence the spiraling thoughts that had consumed him for days. Each sound she made, footsteps, laughter at a memory, the soft click of her camera, felt amplified in his mind, stirring emotions he no longer understood. As night approached, the stillness around them grew heavier. The wind rattled the nearby trees, and the occasional call of a distant bird echoed through the dimly lit rooms. Lily tried to bring warmth into the quiet atmosphere, preparing their dinner and setting out plans for the next day. But Aarav's mind was too full of imagined betrayals to see her intentions clearly. Every gesture she made looked suspicious through the filter of his fear, and even her calm tone felt like a mask hiding secrets he believed she carried. Hours of overthinking pushed him into a frantic mental state. He wandered between rooms, unable to focus, convinced that everything around him pointed to a truth he had invented. His breathing grew uneven as he replayed distorted scenarios that had never happened. The peaceful getaway they had envisioned became a pressure chamber for his thoughts, leaving him feeling cornered by emotions he could no longer suppress. In a moment fueled entirely by panic and misguided certainty, Aarav's jealousy erupted into a tragic impulse. There was no dramatic buildup, only the sudden collapse of someone who had lost control of his mind. When the reality of his actions settled over him, the shock was immediate and crushing. He attempted to cover what had happened, scrambling through the house in desperation, creating a scene that made little sense. The hours following the incident were marked by confusion, fear, and a frantic attempt to erase the truth. Aarav moved through the rental home in a daze, convinced he could reshape the scene into something believable. He rearranged objects, opened windows, and tried to force an explanation that would absolve him. But his actions lacked logic, and every choice he made created more inconsistencies than answers. The shock had left him scattered, unable to think clearly, and the weight of what he had done clung to him like a shadow he couldn't escape. When emergency services arrived the next morning, alerted by concerned neighbors who had noticed strange noises in an unusually silent property, Aarav tried to present himself as devastated and confused. His story shifted depending on who asked the question, and his mannerisms betrayed more than he realized. Investigators immediately sensed that pieces were missing. The disarray inside the house did not match the explanation he attempted to offer, and the timeline he provided lacked any stability. As they walked through the rooms, it became evident that something far more deliberate had happened. Detectives began piecing together the clues. Digital footprints revealed Aarav's emotional decline through search history, deleted drafts, and erratic activity on their shared devices. Witnesses from earlier days of the honeymoon recalled seeing tension between the couple, moments subtle but memorable. Lily's cheerful interactions at markets, tours, and restaurants stood in stark contrast to Aarav's withdrawn, watchful presence. These observations lined up too clearly with the inconsistencies in his account. The deeper authorities looked, the more the truth became impossible for him to outrun. Within days, the investigation concluded that Lily's death was not accidental. Aarav was taken into custody, and the story spread rapidly across news outlets in both countries, shocking everyone who had once celebrated their union. Fami. The aftermath of the case stretched far beyond the courtroom, leaving a ripple of consequences that continued for months. Lily's family in India struggled to process the reality that their daughter, who had left home full of excitement and hope, had never returned. Their home, once filled with her laughter, now carried a quiet heaviness. Photographs from the wedding that had taken place only weeks earlier became painful reminders of how quickly joy had turned into heartbreak. Friends who had celebrated alongside the couple found it impossible to understand how a relationship that seemed so loving had ended in tragedy. In Australia, the community near the coastal lookout remained unsettled. Locals who had crossed paths with the couple in shops and cafes replayed their brief interactions, searching for signs they had missed. Some remembered Lily's bright energy, while others recalled Aarav's distant behavior, which made more sense only after the truth unfolded. The rental home where the incident occurred attracted attention from curious onlookers for weeks, though the silence surrounding it grew heavier as time passed. Aarav's trial drew widespread media coverage. Reporters discussed the psychological aspects of the case, focusing on the jealousy and insecurity that had quietly escalated. Experts analyzed how hidden emotional struggles could erupt into violence when left unaddressed. The courtroom testimonies painted a detailed picture of the couple's final days, revealing how deeply Aarav had sunk into his distorted thoughts. His legal team attempted to highlight his mental state, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. When the verdict was finally delivered, it brought a measure of closure, but no sense of victory. Lily's family felt only the weight of a future without her, while Aarav faced the long-term consequences of a moment that had spiraled from unspoken fears. The tragedy became a cautionary tale shared across platforms, reminding people of the end. The years following the trial brought a different kind of weight to everyone connected to the tragedy. Lily's parents established a quiet routine built around remembrance. They held small gatherings on her birthday, inviting close relatives to light candles and share stories about her kindness, ambition, and the joy she brought into their lives. These gatherings became a way to honor her rather than dwell solely on the pain, but the loss lingered in every corner of their home. Her room remained untouched, filled with the belongings she left behind. Books she never finished, clothes neatly folded, and souvenirs from earlier travels that once symbolized her adventurous spirit. Aarav's family faced their own struggles. Many had never realized the depth of his emotional insecurities, and the shock of his actions fractured relationships that once felt unbreakable. Some relatives distanced themselves, unable to reconcile the person they knew with the crime he had committed. Others visited him in prison, attempting to offer support while trying to understand the series of events that had led him to such a devastating moment. These visits often ended in silence, with unanswered questions hanging heavily between them. Meanwhile, the case continued to spark discussions in academic and psychological circles. Universities used it as a reference point when studying the impact of unaddressed emotional issues, and documentaries revisited the story to explore the underlying patterns of possessiveness and distortion. Mental health professionals emphasized how internal struggles, when ignored, could escalate in unpredictable ways. The story became a reminder that tragedies often have roots long before the final incident. In the coastal town where the couple had stayed, locals gradually returned to their everyday routines, but remnants of the story lingered. The rental home was eventually renovated and listed again, though some people avoided it out of unease. Tour guides occasionally. In the years that followed, the story gradually moved beyond simple headlines and became a complex case studied for its deeper emotional patterns. Journalists revisited the tragedy as new information surfaced through interviews, legal documents, and psychological evaluations. What emerged was a clearer understanding of the quiet buildup that had occurred long before the honeymoon began. Experts identified subtle signs of emotional instability in Aarav's earlier behavior, moments that seemed minor at the time, but, in hindsight, revealed a pattern of insecurity. These findings added new layers to the narrative, turning it into a cautionary example of how unnoticed emotional struggles can grow into dangerous outcomes. Lily's life also began to be remembered in ways that extended beyond the tragedy itself. Advocacy groups created online memorial spaces where people from various countries shared messages about her story. Many wrote about their own experiences with controlling relationships and how Lily's case reminded them of risks they once ignored. Her friends contributed photos, memories, and videos from happier times, building a digital timeline that captured her genuine personality. This collective remembrance shifted the focus from her final moments to the positive impact she had on others, allowing her story to carry meaning instead of only sorrow. Aarav, meanwhile, settled into a routine behind bars, where time moved differently. He attended therapy sessions that forced him to confront his actions and the distorted thoughts that had led him there. Reports from these sessions revealed a man who finally recognized the progression of his jealousy, how minor worries had spiraled into paranoia, and how silence had allowed those fears to grow unchecked. The prison environment became a place of reflection, though nothing could undo the consequences. Researchers, students, and documentary creators continued to discuss the case, analyzing how perception, insecurity,